welcome to another episode of The Break. I am Father Roderick. It is still very, very hot in the Netherlands. It's not as hot as the last Saturday, which was insane, but it's still pretty hot here in the studio. But that won't stop me from recording another episode of this show. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This past Saturday was so far the worst day in terms of heat. It rose all the way up to 34 degrees Celsius, which is somewhere in the 90s Fahrenheit. And normally on a hot day like that, I would just basically lock myself up inside. I would close the curtains all day long, sit in front of a fan, and just try not to move, because every step you take is going to cost energy and it's just very unpleasant. However, this last Saturday, I had multiple reasons to not do that. And one of them was that in the morning, I had my running training. Now, that's early, relatively early in the morning, starts at 9:30. And then it is still reasonably okay outside. It was, I think, 24 degrees when we stopped. It was already 26. But since we're running in the woods, that is still okay. Brought a lot of water with me. But then I had to go to Amsterdam because two of our patrons were visiting Europe. They're on a tour. And so I agreed to meet them in Amsterdam. At first, I invited them to come over here, but then there was a problem with the train, so it was impossible to go to my place by train, and so you had to take buses, and it's very complicated. If you're not used to using public transport in the Netherlands, I just don't recommend just winging it. So instead, I said I can come to Amsterdam, not knowing that would be such a hot day. It was fun, nevertheless. I got to show them some cool places. We went to the Anne Frank house. Didn't go inside because nowadays you have to order your tickets weeks, if not months in advance. There's such a demand. And of course, it's just a very small house. So they can only have a certain number of people every day. But I was able to show them the place, and of course the story of Anne Frank itself is very well known. I also showed them one of the secret churches that we had during the Protestant Reform, where the Catholics were not allowed to worship in public. However, the Dutch being very pragmatic, they did allow the Catholics to worship. However, it couldn't be in a church. And so a number of people transformed their house on the inside into chapels. And there were, I think, almost 30 or 40 of them. There is one that is particularly well preserved. It has also been restored. And from the outside, it just looks like a regular building on the side of one of these canals. You go in, you walk up the stairs, and you go all the way to the attic. And then all of a sudden, you're in this big chapel, and there's an organ, there's a high altar, and it's insane. The guy who owned the house was a very rich German businessman. He had two floors removed, at least part of those floors removed, so that would create a very tall, open space that could serve as a chapel. It is quite interesting. Plus, the house itself is from the 17th century, which, of course, is the golden age for the Dutch economy, mostly because we were pillaging other countries that we occupied. But a lot of what makes Amsterdam was in the 17th century, and it was very cool to just see the rest of the house where they brought the rooms back in their original state. So it gave you a pretty good idea what daily life would look like in the Netherlands around that time. It was a lot of fun. And then what else did we do? There's another place. Most people don't realize that Amsterdam is such a Catholic city, which it is. If you've watched Pulp Fiction, you may recall that conversation between Samuel L. Jackson and what's his name? John Travolta about fries with mayonnaise, and they talk about Amsterdam. It's all the cliches. It's red light district and drugs and fries with mayonnaise being like the worst sin of the Dutch. And so that has, for some people, created the idea that Amsterdam is kind of the Sodom and Gomorrah of Europe, but that's absolutely not the case. Used to be a place of pilgrimage in the Middle Ages, and still up until today, there are a tremendous amount of churches, including Catholic ones, and there are also lots of religious communities that still live in Amsterdam. The Jesuits have their main house there, and a beautiful church that is a very vibrant community, attracts hundreds and hundreds of people. There is a very interesting, like almost a hidden garden in the middle of, very close to the main street in Amsterdam, and it dates back to the Middle Ages, where women that didn't want to join a religious order but still wanted to live a life dedicated to God could live there together. So it was prohibited for men. Only single women could live there, and they spent their lives serving others. So they did mostly charity work, or they would be in education. There was a chapel, so they would pray, but they didn't pronounce vows. There wasn't a superior. All these women were equal. And, well, the last of those beguines, as they were called, died in, I think, in the 70s of the previous century. But ever since, they still maintain those rules. So if you want to live there in the heart of Amsterdam, of course, there's a waiting list, and you have to wait until one of those occupants, one of those women, dies or for other reason leaves the premises, and then you can apply to live there. But there are rules. You need to be a single woman. You can't have a relationship. You cannot have anyone living with you. And if for some reason you choose to get married or enter into a relationship, you have to leave. And it's so funny, like you walk in that very busy touristy part of Amsterdam, you turn a corner, you go through a little archway, and all of a sudden you're in this very quiet garden surrounded by tiny little houses, and it feels like you're in the Middle Ages. It feels like you're in a convent or something like that. There's nothing that betrays that this is in the heart of one of the busiest cities of the Netherlands. So it was a lot of fun for me also to have a reason to go back to Amsterdam and visit all these places. I can't guarantee that I can do this with anyone who's visiting me. Feel free to, let me know if you're ever in the neighborhood. But it just happened to be the case that I had a day available. So if I can, then of course I will. But sometimes I just I can't make it happen. So I hope you don't hold that against me if you're ever in the neighborhood and I happen to be in Rome or somewhere else. But anyway, so that's what I did this past Saturday, and I'm still kind of recovering from that. On Sunday, I had 2 masses. I had to do a second mass because our pastor is still recovering from surgery, and 2 masses on one Sunday is still too much for him. That was an interesting experience as well. So I did the international mass, and I preached about the gospel and translating it to the current situation in the Netherlands, where our cabinet has fallen over a disagreement when it comes to the way in which we treat migrants and refugees. And this has been a big problem for more than a year now. And it's actually a very complicated problem. It has, we of course have the genuine refugees, people that have traveled sometimes from, Africa, or I met this young woman. She fled Ethiopia when the massacres began there. She lost her parents. She doesn't even know if her parents are still alive. She escaped the country on foot and then traveled all the way, just in insane journey. Ended up here in the Netherlands, and now she's in a refugee center waiting for, they do all sorts of exams to see if she's a legitimate refugee, and otherwise she'll be sent back. So, but that's actually, in terms of numbers, not really the biggest problem. We also have, of course, now open borders in Europe. And so we've got a lot of economical migrants that come to work here. And they need a place to stay as well. So we've got tons of people from Poland and other Eastern European countries that are now applying for a job and for housing. And that the combination of that, and plus these very... The war in Ukraine, of course, has brought also a huge number of Ukrainian people that at least temporarily need to live here. So anyway, I had a homily about what I think the gospel asks us to do, and it's not to close our borders, but to help wherever we can. And always remembering that ultimately we are all, to a certain extent, either refugees or travelers. If you look at your own genetic background, you can nowadays have companies research that for you. You'll discover that you have like part Viking in you, or in my case, it's like a part Chinese. And so the entirety of our Western countries, look at the United States. Most of the people that live there are not from that area of the world. They are from Europe. They came from Ireland, from Germany, from whatever. And so the Bible, in a number of places, tells us, well, keep that in mind. Once, and this is especially true, of course, for the Jewish people, you are on the run, you are threatened, you are in exile, and you wanted to have a home and a country to live in, and God gave it to you. But always remember that other people may be in the same situation as your forefathers were. So I had this whole homily, and then afterwards someone just really was upset and very mad at me that I dared to talk about these political issues in my homily. And I could tell that we wouldn't probably come to an agreement, but it was a bit surprising, because for me, I feel like if we cannot translate the gospel to our day-to-day situation and the issues that we're struggling with now, if I only have to talk about spiritual topics, then what purpose does that serve? For me, the Bible and my faith is supposed to be a guide, a guiding light in difficult times. And so I don't think that the church is should be a political organization, nor should a priest have or display or preach about his or her well, in case it's a priest, it's mostly a him, his political preferences. So I will never advise people to not vote this or do vote that. But there are general rules, I think, especially when it touches upon the dignity of people and also the value of the marginalized people and people that are on the move or are trying to flee a war or anything. There's just a basic decency, I think, that every single person has a right to have, even if, in terms of the actual situation, there is a problem, but it's still, you cannot let, and this has happened in the Netherlands now for a year, where hundreds of people, including children, have to sleep outside, sitting in a chair, because we haven't organized enough beds. And so for me, if people start telling me, well, we just have to close the borders and we have to send them home, I'm thinking, no, you don't know that story. There may be certain people that actually don't belong here and shouldn't be here, but there are also genuine refugees and people that would be killed if you sent them back. I'm thinking of that young woman who told her story. If you send her back to Ethiopia, she has no future there, and she's gone through so much trauma. We need to take care of people like that. And it's up to us as rich countries, I think, to take our responsibilities. And at the same time, of course, the core problem is not just that we need to find places for these refugees. We need to try to solve, and we can only do this as an international community, we have to solve the problems in the countries that these people flee from. And we have a political responsibility that goes beyond our borders to make this world a better place. And for me, faith is one of those connecting tissues in our world that can actually inspire people to work together to make this world a better place. Otherwise, if you don't have faith, if you don't have stories, if you don't have common values that are transmitted through stories, then it's everyone for himself. And all these countries become, like isolationists. And then it's basically us versus the world. And that has never solved problems in history. So it was quite a weekend, I have to say. After 2 masses like that and having like a difficult conversation afterwards, I was pretty shell-shocked. I still am a bit recovering from those busy days, but I still had a little bit of energy left, so I wanted to be there for you in order to record a podcast.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl and that kid sees dead people and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
So Danielle's asking me in the chat, did you already see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? What do you think of it? Unfortunately, I haven't. And the reason is that actually I was planning on seeing it this morning in a matinee. Because I don't know about your country where you live, but here in the Netherlands, ticket prices for watching a movie in the cinema are insane. They've risen so much since the pandemic. And and even if you want to get a drink or some popcorn, it gets even worse. So I'm always looking for. I don't watch that many movies in the theater anymore, because if they end up on Disney Plus or on HBO Max or Netflix, and I can wait. I have so much that I want to see. But a movie like Indiana Jones, I want to see it in the theater because it's part of my inheritance, or how do you say that? It's part of my youth. I grew up with Indiana Jones and Star Wars. So seeing that this is the last movie with Harrison Ford, who is now in his 80s, I don't want to miss that in theater. So I was looking for a matinee because then the price is okay. It's $10, and I can cough up $10. It is, however, the price of a monthly subscription to a streaming platform. So even $10 is quite a bit of money. It used to be, I think, $7.50 in the morning. But anyway, I was hoping to go today, but then I got a message from a friend of mine who I worked with in TV, and he said, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood, and can I stop by?" And of course, it was in the morning, so I spent my time talking with him and having a cup of coffee. And maybe I'll go tomorrow, or sometime this week. I will definitely go and watch it. I can't wait to see it. Speaking of Indiana Jones, I found this super cool, funny clip the other day on Instagram. Someone posted it. And it is an interview that was done in the year 2000. Remember that? Maybe you weren't born yet. Or you were still in diapers. But I do remember that. It was the year, of course, where everybody thought that the world would end and, well, computers would be all explode because of the Y2K bug and everything. But it was also the year that Harrison Ford appeared on Conan O'Brien's show and did an interview about whatever he was working on at the time. So we're talking about an interview that took place 23 years ago. I mean, it's just insane that the year 2000 is 23 years ago. It makes me feel even older than I already feel. And then they are talking about, a possible future Indiana Jones movie. And I just let you listen to what they say because it's hilarious. Nobody, of course, at the time thought that Harrison Ford, when he was 80, would still be doing movies. So this is the interview.
People will never get tired of that genre. You could do it for, you could, when you're 80, you could do ones where they just bring the treasures to you. And you're in, that's good, yeah. Good job. Just something to think about. Indiana Jones and the comfortable bed. Oh, yeah. Put that with the rest of them over there.
That's Conan O'Brien, and it's just a joke, but here we are. Harrison Ford is 80, and he's still doing, a movie like Indiana Jones. It's insane. And of course, he's not sitting in a comfortable bed waiting for people to bring him another, Ark of the Covenant or another treasure. Just put it over there in the garage. No, it's actually a lot better than that. I hope at least some of you have already seen it. But I'm really in the mood for some Indiana Jones, if only to just see the iconic hat again and hear that music. How can I not go watch that movie? It hasn't been the big box office success that Disney was anticipating it would be, but I don't think you can blame this on Disney or on the writers or on Harrison Ford. This is a new world since the pandemic, and the entire economy is so different from what it was in years ago. And in fact, I'm glad that we get a new Indiana Jones movie, but I'm also glad that, for instance, with Star Wars, they have chosen to go at it slowly and not overdo it with new movies every year like they initially planned on doing it. I want movies to be an event, and then, yes, I will pay the money to go see it in a theater. But it has to be more than just something that I could also see on my TV. This is also one of the issues that I have, little segue, with the current first season of, or maybe the only season, of Secret Invasion. This is, of course, a Marvel story starring Samuel L. Jackson, and then the guy who played the bad guy in Solo, I think. And it's about a Skrull invasion. So Skrulls are aliens, and they had been promised a new planet and they didn't get it, so instead they invade our planet Earth, and they can morph into anyone. So anyone can be a Skrull, and I love the idea. There's this based on, well, just the title is based on a very famous and very popular comic book run where basically all Marvel was telling this huge story about this massive war, and even superheroes sometimes would be Skrulls, and nobody would know that they're, you know, I don't know if it was the Hulk or anything, because I've not read the comic book series yet, but the big superheroes that we know from the previous Marvel stories would be involved in this. Instead, they tell this very small-scale story, which even in terms of the way it looks and the way it is filmed, looks very small. Very cheap. I mean, I've complained in the past that some of these new Star Wars series look small, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and should have been a theatrical movie with a bigger budget to tell that story well. Well, this is even, to a certain extent, worse. This feels like a very run-of-the-mill, kind of lackluster series, which is it just doesn't work for me. We're now at episode 3. Maybe, so that's the halfway point. Maybe the other 3 episodes will lift it to another level. But so far, I'm not convinced it will. It feels like they're really, I think they probably thought, well, let's not do a movie about this because the risk is too big, or maybe we just don't want to invest that much money. We have so many other movies that we want to put in the theaters. Let's turn this into a TV show, and then with that tiny budget, most of the budget probably goes to Samuel L. Jackson and some of the other famous actors that have a role, but the story itself doesn't work, and it's all feels as if it is filmed on very small, dark. Everything is at night, and very small stages, or even with using the volume with stagecraft. And I miss the superheroes. This story just really needs a couple of those famous superheroes to make us feel that this is part of the MCU. And right now, I feel like this could be just replace the actors, change the names, and you would have a very mediocre television series that nobody would watch. So I don't know what the numbers are for Disney. Probably we don't get to know that. But so far, this is, for me at least, the most disappointing television series that they've produced. And I think this would have been so much better as a movie with a slightly bigger budget and stay closer to the comic book story, which now I want to read, because everybody tells me, oh, it's so different and it's so much more impressive and more fun than the television series. I don't know if I'm the only one. Let me know if you disagree, and we'll see. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe the next 3 episodes will totally have me revise my opinion, but this is what I feel at the halfway point. Another series that I started watching again is For All Mankind, and I'm now almost at the end of season 2. This, of course, is a series by Ronald D. Moore. It tells the story of an alternate timeline in which the Russians are the first ones to land on the moon, and in season 2, we're still in our past, so it tells a slightly different version of the history of NASA and the exploration of the moon. And then I think in the next season, it will actually go into the future, so it will become proper science fiction. And for me, this is one of the best science fiction shows that I've ever seen. I love Silo, as you know, and I think it's amazing what they did. But in terms of what I feel when I'm watching an episode, for me, For All Mankind tops anything else. That series really makes me cry and makes me just feel so bad about what happens to some people, or so concerned about some of the mishaps that are caused sometimes by just human weakness, and at the same time excited when there is a new sudden development. There are so many of these twists and turns in the story. The show looks amazing. The acting is insanely good. I mean, wow, what a series. And I really hope that there's going to be another season after the last one that aired, and I hope that I'll have caught up in the meantime. Another series that I need to catch up with is Star Wars Rebels. As you know, I have not finished watching Star Wars Rebels, but I need to, because Ahsoka is going to be, actually not officially, but it is going to be the continuation of Star Wars Rebels, but then with real live action. And so season 4 is going to lead in straight into the events of Ahsoka. And so Ahsoka, premiering, I think, on the 24th of August, smack in the middle of my vacation when I'm in France and probably will have really bad internet. So thanks. I still want to make sure that I've watched the final season of Star Wars Rebels. I've only got like 3 more episodes of season 3 to watch. I'm really enjoying it. It had a bit of a slow start. But there are some excellent episodes in every season, actually. So here's what I'm thinking. Maybe this is something you'd be interested in. What if I do, like, for me, a first watch, and for most of my fellow Star Wars fans, it would be a rewatch of season 4. And so I watch an episode, and then I do a YouTube video. And I'll just give you my opinions. I'll talk a little bit about the major themes. Just like reviewing every episode. It won't be, always a very researched kind of talk, but it just take, 5-7 minutes to just go over that episode and then just continue the conversation in the comments. Would that be something that you would be interested in? Let me know. And if so, make sure you are subscribed to my main channel on YouTube, which is youtube.com/Father Roderick.
Catholics rock!
It is time for a quick visit to the Peculiar Bunch, because you would think that in the summertime when it's bloody hot in Rome, the Pope would take it easy.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
But this Pope doesn't go on vacation. He's not, chilling in his backyard with a margarita watching TV. No! This Pope has just announced a consistory.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
Or is it a consistory? Consistory? How do I pronounce this? You know what? This is where I'm so glad that I have a search engine. And now, I've always used Google to search something, like most of us do. But recently I've switched to Bing, because Bing actually has artificial intelligence, and there is a chat version of Bing that replies not by showing you, hey, this is a website you may want to check out, but by actually telling you what you want to know. And as a story, I really, really enjoy interacting with this search engine. So let me just go to Microsoft Bing and click on the chat function. And I will ask you, how do I pronounce consistory? I'll tell you in a minute what it means. I can't type anymore. Consistory. There we go. How do I pronounce consistory? Because I don't know where I put the emphasis. Probably the people in the chat have already answered it, but you can listen to the pronunciation on howtopronounce.com. They have an audio file. Well, thank you. Can you give me the link, please? I'll just click on it. Okay, so let's take a listen. How do I pronounce this?
Consistory.
There you go. I said it right. I knew it. Consistory. So what is a consistory? I also asked Bing what a consistory is, and thinking that it was just a Catholic thing, And then it actually answered me. What is a consistory? A consistory is a type of ecclesiastical council charged with tasks of governing a religious organization. It can also refer to any solemn assembly and council. I was like, that's not enough. No, what is a consistory in the Catholic Church? And then Bing answered, in the Roman Catholic Church, a consistory is a formal meeting of the College of Cardinals called by the Pope. There are two kinds of consistories. This, by the way, checks out. I wouldn't read this to you if the AI wasn't correct. So there are two kinds of consistories: extraordinary and ordinary. An extraordinary consistory is held to allow the Pope to consult with the entire membership of the College of Cardinals. All the cardinals have to be there. So I asked, that's an extraordinary consistory. What is an ordinary one? An ordinary consistory, being answered, is ceremonial in nature and attended by cardinals resident in Rome. For example, the Pope elevates new cardinals to the college at a consistory. Pope Francis has called consistories for ceremonies of canonization as well. So there you have it. This is a meeting of cardinals. And what are cardinals? Cardinals this is a very old institution in the Catholic Church. They used to be the priests of Rome. Rome, of course, being a big city. And so the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, as you know. And his priests were called cardinals. Now, over time, of course, the world has stayed the same, but the church has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. And so ultimately, these cardinals were bishops from all over the world that had a special bond with the Pope, and were also kind of the group of bishops that he could consult on important things. They would have a very important role when a successor had to be chosen, because the Pope had abdicated, as did Pope Benedict XVI, or died, which was the case in most of the time with popes. And so the cardinals come together and in a conclave, which is not the same as a consistory, in secret choose a successor, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily has to be a cardinal. They can, in fact, pick anyone. Obviously, it has to be a Catholic and male to be the next pope. So that hasn't happened very often in church, but there are moments in history where they would just call a priest who had no idea that these cardinals wanted him to become a pope, and then they would just consecrate him bishop, and then he would be presented as the next pope. The papal function is not an ordination. So the pope is how do you say that? Ontologically, just another bishop. He's just kind of the successor to the role of Saint Peter, and so he is to lead the other bishops. So why did Pope Francis call a consistory? And I think in this case, it's an ordinary consistory. It is because he has announced that he wanted to nominate a whole number of new cardinals. Again, the Pope can pick anyone to become a cardinal, and most of the time, these bishops are a little bit older, especially when they are created cardinals. We say the Pope creates cardinals. It's not a nomination; he creates them. It doesn't mean that he's using some clay and then some a sacred magical breath to bring them to life. It's not that kind of creation, but a cardinal is created by the Pope, and when these cardinals reach the age of, I think, 82, if I'm not mistaken, they lose their voting right in a conclave. And so there has to be a certain number. This is not really, I think, prescribed by law how many cardinals you can have, but there is a traditional number of cardinals. And so every once in a while, the Pope will look at the current state of affairs and will say, hey, I'm going to call a consistory in Rome, and these are the bishops, and in some cases priests, that I want to be cardinals. And so during that consistory, these will be presented. It's always interesting to see what Pope Francis does, because, of course, these cardinals are going to be there to elect his successor. So this is also a way in which a pope, of course, a pope cannot, before he dies, say, and before I close my eyes, I was thinking the next pope would be, was that Father Roderick? I've been watching his stuff on YouTube. He seems like a nice guy. We'll just make him pope. That wouldn't fly. And by the way, that will never happen, because I still believe that the Holy Spirit is protecting the church. So no risk there. But no, after the Pope is gone, then these cardinals will elect a successor. But of course, we trust that the Holy Spirit works in that process. At the same time, it's also human. There's also politics going on. There are also certain cardinals will say, well, we need this kind of Pope. And then others would say, well, no, come on, we've had a Pope like that. We need this guy. We need an older one. We need a younger Pope. We need someone who is very much, for instance, one of the reasons that they picked Bergoglio, Cardinal Bergoglio, as the next pope was that he actually really had some good ideas on how to reform the Curia, which was one of the main reasons that Pope Benedict abdicated. It was the Curia was out of control, and Pope Francis, being a Jesuit and having had a lot of experience as an archbishop in Argentina, seemed to be like a great temporary pope. Like he was already at an advanced age. He was actually about to retire when he was elected. He didn't, put his his name in the hat. So like, pick me. No, he's like, I was just about to retire and I'm getting too old for this stuff. And so, but everybody thought, let's just ask him to reorganize the Curia, and then probably, he's old. It will be a very short pontificate, and then we'll see what we do. And of course, as you know, the history was slightly different from what everyone expected. He's been here for quite a long time, and his impact on the church has been, of course, much broader than just a reorganization of the Curia, something that he still is working on, and he's been quite successful, I think, in making some very overdue changes to the way the church works. But now he's also expanding that to the way that dioceses work, and he's initiating this whole synodal process where I think we will see a whole new modus operandi, you could say, like a new way in which the church functions, which I think might actually, in hindsight, which you can only tell, of course, a century after these facts, we won't be around, but I think that this might actually be a game changer, a very revolutionary time in the history of the church. So the fact that the Pope is now able to choose who is going to be part of that College of Cardinals does, of course, have an impact on the longevity of his, I would say, the emphasis that he puts on certain things. Popes, of course, defend the faith and the dogmas, and part of that is immutable and has always been the same. But then there's always, of course, also the form and the focus of a papacy. And this Pope, of course, very much focused on the poor and on the church as a field hospital, as an organization that is not there for its own glory, let alone for its own wealth, but it's here to serve. And he wants priests and bishops and also popes to be shepherds. And I think that in the way that he's been influencing the composition of the College of Cardinals, you see that he is very consistent in making sure that what he sees as the future of the Catholic Church is reflected in also the people that will run the church when he's no longer there. And so again, he has picked a lot of bishops from all over the world. So the composition of the College of Cardinals has never been this international before. For a long time, it was dominated by Italian bishops. And there was a concentration of power, especially in the Western world. This Pope now has brought in so many bishops from small countries, countries where the church is persecuted, third world countries where they are serving a very small flock that is extremely fragile. And he wants to bring their experience into the heart of the church in the Vatican so that his successor will also have that open mind and that sensitivity, I think, to what is happening everywhere in the world and not just in our, Christian Western world that, let's be honest, is shrinking. At least the Christian identity of our Western world is shrinking, whereas in other parts of the world it is growing and it's blossoming. And I think Pope Francis is right to make sure that shift of the balance is also reflected in the composition of the cardinals that will ultimately choose his successor. I hope that helped. Let's move on to the next topic.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
I did a bit of reading this past week. I read 3 books, and they were all serious books. Right now for this week, I want to read some fiction again, or some fantasy, or maybe even some Star Wars novels. But this past week, I don't know, it's just coincidence that I was reading a number of nonfiction books. The first one is called "It's Not About the Burqa." Muslim women on faith, feminism, sexuality, and race. And I don't know how I came across this book. Maybe I saw someone else reading it on Goodreads. I was like, hey, that's interesting. It's basically a collection of essays written by Muslim women from different backgrounds, different countries, different races. We've got some people from Africa, some people from the Middle East, some Muslim women that live here in the West. And it was a fascinating insight in how they define themselves and how they look at their faith and the position of women inside the Muslim faith, and also talk about the way they are perceived and the prejudices and the way society often treats them. And also about feminism, because of course there is a very generalized idea that in the Muslim faith, women are kind of secondary, and there's a lot of oppression, and the burqa and the veil is often seen by outsiders as basically a symbol of that oppression, that women cannot show their hair. And it's so interesting that these women actually have a very, very different experience of that. And for some of them, yes, there is a lot of patriarchal misuse of power within Islam. But other women say, well, this is my choice. This is my identity. I want this for religious reasons. Why don't people just respect me? And they will say, well, actually, we do have power. And if you look at the Quran, the value of women is much more in the forefront than later on part of Muslim culture would implement. And so there is quite a bit of misogyny and the word is so hard to pronounce, patriarchal power play that is robbing Muslim women from the dignity and maybe also the influence that they have according to the Quran. Now, of course, it's just a slice of life out of these women, and it's, the book is not a reflection of the entirety of the female Muslim world, so it does have its flaws, of course, or it's not really. I mean, it was interesting to read, but you do miss some stories that are there, and but it's just so interesting to read about that world, which is quite unknown to me from the perspective of people that actually are part of that culture. And if I think about that book, I'm almost thinking I wish that people would also be able to read stories of Catholics and of priests, that just instead of talking about us, that they would be able to see the church and our faith from my perspective, from my personal perspective. And I also get irked when on social media, people will just hate on me or on the church, and it without really knowing me and only judging from what they see from the outside. And it also this book reminded me that I have to be careful in the way that I judge other people's experiences. And I'm not always part of the culture the cultures around me. And so before I pronounce myself, before I judge, it's always good to first listen and to immerse yourself in the experiences of the people that are actually a part of that particular faith group. And I've made quite a few mistakes, I think, in the past, where you watch a few videos on YouTube and then you think, oh, I know about why that faith is, why the Catholic Church is irreconcilable with that particular form of Christianity or whatever. You always have to be careful. First research and listen before you judge. It's actually a very Jesuit way of forming a judgment and to evaluate. So always first, read, listen, ponder, weigh, and then ultimately you may have your conclusion, as long as you don't think that is the final truth about things. And I think I've changed over the years, and I've become milder, and also more. I know that my opinion is oftentimes just my opinion, and I have been wrong so often. And that's not a problem, because we just work with what we know and what we read. But especially now that we live in an age where disinformation is so rampant and there's so much fake news, I think we really owe it to ourselves and to the world in which we live and to the people that we live with to always be open to change our mind and to never think, well, hey, I'm right and you're wrong, and that's the end of the discussion. I think that attitude is not helping us. It's not helping the world in which we live. And if you open yourself, ask questions and listen, it can only make you richer. It can only enhance your view of the world. Anyway, that's what this book did for me. Then the second book I read was a book in Dutch. It's written by a criminal lawyer, a woman called, she calls herself Master Leonie, Lenny, I think you would say in English. And Master is, of course, the title that she got when she graduated from law school. And so she's a criminal lawyer. She defends criminals, from very small petty criminals to the big drug cartel leaders and whatnot. And it is a fascinating book. She was on Instagram. She's actually quite well known in the Netherlands because she will often be asked in talk shows to talk about the world of lawyers and whatnot. So, but she's on Instagram and on TikTok, I think, as well, because she wants to kind of close the gap between the work that she actually does, she and other lawyers, and then the way that work is often perceived. The discussions like, oh, we should just be much stricter, and we should give people lifelong sentences or even put them to death. And we're often very vengeful when it comes to transgressions of our social order. And she tells the other side of that story. She says, I need to defend criminals, even though I may discover in the process that they actually committed a crime that they are sentenced for or are about to be sentenced for, but they still have the right to a fair process, and they need to be defended. This is what our juridical system, I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but that's how our society works. If I wouldn't defend certain people because I have a moral judgment about what they did, then how can we make sure that everybody gets a fair process? You are innocent until proven guilty. And she also gives a lot of examples where that can go wrong if lawyers don't do a good job, or if judges would just follow public opinion. And it was a very, very interesting like behind the scenes look of this whole world and why it matters that we have lawyers. It was in many ways pretty eye-opening for me. Again, a story from someone who actually works in that world and has stories to tell. I always love that because it's like a first-person perspective. The third book I am still currently reading is about the whole refugee situation. It's written by Omar Akkad, and it's called What Stranger Paradise. It tells the story of two kids that are both refugees, and they're both fleeing on a boat. They arrive in our world, and they have to somehow find a new future. And then, of course, the paradise that they always dreamt about when they were fleeing, or that their parents dreamt about, turns out to be a very strange and oftentimes very hostile paradise. It's a fictional story, but it's based on, of course, the harsh reality of refugees. It's hard to read because it all of a sudden makes the numbers that you see in the news, it gives it a human face. And I think that's important, to let yourself be touched by those stories instead of just talking about that at a theoretical level. I think we owe it to the people that we live with in this world to take them seriously and to listen to their stories just as much as we lucky people who do live in safe countries and still have a house. We like to be respected. We like to be listened to. And we don't want to become a number. So we owe it to our brothers and sisters that are less fortunate than we. That's why I'm reading that book.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Just plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
All right, in a minute, I'm going to talk about the Week of Threads, the big meta social platform that has launched to tremendous success in its first few days. But first of all, I want to talk about a video game that I'm actually quite excited about because it is based on one of my favorite animated series called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And apparently a video game is in the making. It will be launched in the later part of this year, and it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender Quest for Balance.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
Woo! Play the legend, it says on the screen. And you see beautifully rendered environments that we know from the animated series. Unlock the mysteries, which seems to indicate that this is a puzzle game. Embrace your destiny. And restore balance to the world. Which is what the Avatar is for, of course. Avatar: The Last Airbender Quest for Balance, coming in the fall of 2023, according to this trailer. I have to say, it looks really, really good. Very much use cell shading technique so that the animated characters that you play with do look very much like the style of the animated series. And a lot of the characters that I see in this trailer are part. I haven't finished watching the entire series yet. I think I'm already in the third season. So anyway, but it's a lot of fun. I love that series. And of course, also co-created and written by Dave Filoni, who's, of course, Mr. Star Wars right now. So you know that a lot of these stories are really good quality. The only thing that makes me go a bit like, I'm not sure about that, is it's a puzzle game. And what I like about the series is it is so, it's funny, there's a good story. So I hope that there's going to be more to this game than just some puzzles using the 4 elements. But that's so kind of obvious. And I have never been a fan of puzzle games. I don't mind the occasional puzzle every once in a while in the game, like in the Tomb Raider series. There's quite a bit of puzzling, but it's not the only thing. It's also adventure. And I hope that this video game. We don't know much about the story or about the type of game, but I hope it's not just like hardcore puzzle stuff, because that feels too cheap. The franchise is too important and too valuable for this. What I hope is that it's going to be also have a good story and some humor maybe. And if it works, then maybe there are going to be other Avatar games as well in the future. I would love to play an Avatar RPG. But maybe we'll have to wait and see what the live action series on Netflix is going to do. That is also something I'm very much looking forward to, with a bit of apprehension as well, because the animated series is so good. I can't imagine that they can top that, but maybe they can. I'm happy to be surprised by what they're going to do. So that is a very cool video game that I'm definitely going to check out. And then we need to talk about Threads. So Threads, of course, the big Twitter killer, as it is called by some media, because it always sounds nice and clickbaity. Hey, just check out the new Twitter killer. But this was, of course, something that everybody expected at one point to happen. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, has gotten so much power basically by copying what other people did successfully and then making it even more successful. There's almost nothing that Mark Zuckerberg built that is his invention. He either just buys the company or he'll just make it himself. And he even tried to copy some stuff and then decided, well, there's no money in there, so we'll just stop this. But think of TikTok, for instance. The moment that started to get traction, he came up with Reels, and it was almost identical in the way you could swipe up and the way the algorithm works. It was clearly copycat stuff. And so now they did that with Twitter as well, knowing, of course, that since Elon Musk took over Twitter, there was a lot of grumbling amongst the users, and especially amongst the journalists that felt like, well, you know what, this is no longer working for us. Where's the moderation? And Elon Musk, of course, politically also has some very controversial opinions and seemed to endorse a lot of people that before he took over would not have a voice on Twitter. And he gives them a podium and even likes. And we're not just talking like people, like controversial people in the sense that, well, they it's just politics. It's also just racist and Nazis, and it's just really, really, it makes me very uncomfortable. The kind of people that are using that platform. Plus, of course, technically, he fired so many of his technicians and moderators that people that know what they're talking about said this is gonna fall on its face at one point. You cannot run such a big platform with so few people, and then having someone like Elon Musk at the helm who will just have a crazy idea one morning or in the middle of the night, and he wants it executed that like an hour later. It's ultimately, if you don't have the people to run the technical side of things, well, it is going to collapse, because Twitter is the result of years and years of iteration and improvement, and even the technicians and the programmers that worked on Twitter before they got fired said, we don't even know how it works. It's all, so like everything is interconnected, and we've seen many times in the past how that caused usability problems. And then, of course, last week, all of a sudden, you couldn't see tweets anymore unless you were logged in, unless you had an account. So all of a sudden, this kind of open space that Twitter has been for quite a while, where lots of government companies and also even the Pope, he would just tweet out his messages and people could just embed that tweet anywhere. Now you can't, because, well, at least recently they reinstalled that possibility to watch tweets without having an account. But for about a week, you couldn't. And then he also forced people that were using TweetDeck, like I was a TweetDeck user. And I've worked months on creating like lists of people that I wanted to follow. And to me, it's extremely valuable, because on one screen, I can see everything that's happening in my spheres of interest. And I know that journalists are using it very, very much just to gather news and to cross-check and whatnot. All of a sudden, if you logged in to TweetDeck, it was broken. It wouldn't load anything. And then Elon Musk said, yeah, it's because we want to limit the amount of tweets that you can see. It didn't really explain why. There are some rumors that it was because a lot of the processing power and bandwidth was provided by Google and he just didn't want to pay the bills. I don't know if that's true or not. But fact is, he did limit the amount of tweets that you could watch. And if you would go over a very small amount of tweets, like 600, if you're not a subscriber and a paying subscriber, then that's the end of the line for that day. You cannot see anything else. Well, I don't know about you, but I read way more. I don't read them all, but I did view way more than 600 tweets on one day. So he says, you have to pay for it. And then you can see, 8,000 or 10,000 tweets. But it was too late already. Like all the media were like, oh, this is the end of Twitter. This is the final straw. And a lot of people were like, yeah, I'm so fed up with this. But where's the alternative? Mastodon, which I have been a very happy user of, it's still pretty complicated for someone who's used to the infrastructure of Twitter. It's something that works for geeks, but it's still so in its early stages. I think ultimately it will evolve and it will get better, but right now it's still a pretty clunky experience, especially the first steps to get to establish a community there. So that's not really working. Then you had Blue Sky, which is created by Jack Dorsey, who used to, of course, work at Twitter and used to be the CEO of Twitter. And initially was developed by Twitter, and now it's a separate company. But they were still in beta phase, and it was invite only. So I got an invitation through a friend of mine, and I was very impressed. So I started using Blue Sky, and it felt very much like, yeah, this is what Twitter used to be. This is why I love Twitter so much in the early years. And this is it. And it's to a certain extent even better than what Twitter was. But it's very small, and none of my friends are on Blue Sky. So I only have, 40 followers. And it's really, really difficult to find. I mean, I love the conversations there. And it has a bit of that like inner vibe, like, oh, it's just us, the lucky few who have an invitation. So you don't have spam robots or anything. And it looks promising, but it's too slow. It's not slow. They have not been rolling this out fast enough. And so Mark Zuckerberg, he was, of course, already working on this Twitter alternative. And when he saw the news, like the general sentiment in the world that this is the end of the line for Twitter, we need an alternative now, he decided to launch Threads, I think a week before it was originally planned. And it's still in a state where it misses a lot of the very basic functionality that even Blue Sky already has. So, but the big advantage of Threads, of this new social platform, is that it is linked one-on-one with Instagram. And there are millions, if not billions of people on Instagram. And as soon as they launch Threads, you can basically, if you can install the app, which you cannot do if you're in Europe, in most countries, because, meta and privacy, that is quite a problem, especially with the European rules. I don't think that Meta dared to launch it here because they could incur huge fines because they just don't follow the rules when it comes to data gathering. At least they don't follow the European rules. Anyway, despite that, it's been a massive success because everybody who already was on Instagram could easily continue the conversation on Threads. And even though it's extremely limited what it does is rock solid and very stable. And I also noticed that their whole way of interacting with the people on the platform has changed. Facebook used to be this big, very corporate-like organization where you could complain, but it would just disappear in a void. And it was just whatever these guys are doing. You can tell that they have learned from the PR problems of Elon Musk, and also, to a certain extent, the PR disaster of Reddit in the past few weeks. The one thing they needed to do is to at least convey the impression that they were listening and that they are doing this because they just love to build something with the users. And that is interesting to see that very open attitude. And they joke around, there's like people are complaining and that they will answer people on, they must have an entire team that's on top of that. But if someone says, well, it's such a mess. I see lots of accounts from people that I don't even follow. I want a chronological feed. Then they will just answer. They say, hey, actually, great. Taking notes now. Definitely, we're going to do that. And when someone says, but I miss audio. I want to upload audio. Like, thanks for the idea. And they're very human. And I know that this is all, there's a PR company that knows how to do this, but they do it very, very well. It creates a different vibe. You don't no longer feel that, it's this big meta corporation and can we even trust them because, we haven't been able to trust them in the past. But in the way they communicate, I think they are trying to downplay that aspect or that reputation. They're trying to change their reputation by having a much more open conversation with the people that use it. So I'm actually already using it. I have a Canadian iTunes account because when I was in Canada years ago, someone gifted me an iTunes card, but it could only be spent in the Canadian iTunes store. So I created a Canadian account. And in Canada, you can download the app. So and then there's no problem. I don't have to use a VPN or anything. And immediately people started to find me, and I was reading these posts or these threads. It gave me some really good ideas on how I can change my own presence and the way I communicate on social media. If you want to listen to my thoughts and how this inspired me to, and gave me some very good ideas about my own communication, I recommend you listen to this week's episode of The Walk, where I talk about threads and this sudden idea that I had. Why haven't I thought of this before? So I'm really enjoying it. And I also think that many of the things that people are missing right now, they've already said they are working on it. I hope they learn from their mistakes and from the criticism they've received in the past. I still don't really trust Facebook because ultimately Meta wants to make money. So at one point there are going to be algorithms, there are going to be advertisements. So, but I enjoy it as it is right now, and at least things are starting to move again. There's competition, and competition in this world is always good. It will challenge people to come up with something better, something that works better. And I'm sure that over time you will see the trolls and you will see the fake news and everything, and all the problems from Twitter and Reddit will not all of a sudden disappear because we have an alternative. No, I think the problems are our problems as a society, as users, but it does make a difference how you act upon those problems and if you moderate or not. And so in that respect, I think I'm hopeful. And if maybe this is not the end of the line, maybe ultimately it will be Mastodon. But right now I can see why so many people prefer Threads over Mastodon and over Twitter. Let's be honest. They're already at 100 million signups, which is insane. If you would extrapolate this, they will be way bigger than Twitter in a few weeks from now. Let alone the end of the year. There's traction here, and I don't think that anyone can counter that with whatever alternative. On the other hand, I'm totally okay if people want to keep using Twitter or Mastodon, whatever works for you. By all means, continue to use it. It's not about reach. It's not about numbers. It's about the quality of the conversations that you can have and the friendships that you can build. At least that's what it is for me. And with that, I am going to wrap things up. And I'm going to turn on the ventilator again and get some air moving here. I can't do that while I'm recording the show because it will create noise in the microphone, but it's warm in here. I want to spend a moment to thank my dear patrons, all of you that are helping me to do this work. And I hope that you, if you're not a patron yet, you want to join that community. And oh, what's happening? Hello. Uh-oh. My microphone stopped working.